How do you avoid getting swept up in hustle culture when your business requires you to always be online?
And how do you find a why that's bigger than making money when you've got to make a living and pay the bills?
In response to the lack of down-to-earth and accessible advice about marketing for people trying to make their own way in business, Daisy Morris created the Selfhood.
In this week's episode, we sit down with Daisy and discuss how we can bring some much needed realness and humanity to the ever-growing online world.
Daisy!
Hello.
Hello. Thank you so much for coming. It's so great to have you here to talk about all things selfhood. I guess the first thing I want to ask you is that you are a marketer. You run an online platform, online business, which is also synonymous, online business, with hustle culture. Mm-hmm. How on earth, when you spend so much time on the internet and in this world, do you avoid getting caught up in the traps of it?
I don't, to be honest. I've learned the hard way, essentially, and I think it's really tricky at the moment because there's such opposing opinions around look after your mental health, and it's almost like the extreme of shaming people for working late, and then you've got the people that are like 5 a.m, green juice,
yes.
Wake up, cardio, work till 11 o'clock at night. You won't be successful unless you're like working around the clock. And I think we've got these two really extreme messages, which is really hard. And I've personally been on that side and that side. And I worked really too hard in around COVID time. And I actually made myself really ill. And I've spoken about this publicly before, but I was losing hair. I had to go to the hospital for heart palpitations. And my stress levels were so bad to the point they were like, you need to slow down, otherwise, like, you won't have a choice. So I took a lot of time off and it was amazing. But actually what I realised is I just love my job and it's okay to have a balance and work hard. So I think what I've learned is to really read the signs for me, for when I start to feel like the hustle culture mentality is slipping in. And, you know, I preach about trying to avoid comparison culture where possible, but it happens. I still experience that. I still look at other people and think, oh my gosh, they're killing it, I'm not doing enough. But I think it's about really understanding what you need as an individual, because you can follow all of the pages online, you can read all the advice, you can listen to other entrepreneurs, but actually it's about finding a workflow that fully works for you. So, for example, I'm not a morning person. I don't take calls before 11. Like, that is my business boundary, unless it's super urgent and I have to. But a lot of people think that's madness. They want to get up early, but I work late to compensate that.
Yeah.
And it's about just creating a flow that works for you. And it's a privilege to be able to do that, don't get me wrong. And I know that a lot of people might not be able to do that, but it's about identifying in you, what are my triggers? What are the things that make me feel bad about myself? Or what are the people or the Instagram pages or just the things that make you feel a certain way? And then what is it you need to do as an individual to overcome that, and not following the cookie cutter entrepreneur tech bro advice that's out there? Because I think that's when it's really easy to spiral, is when you look at everyone else and think, shit, I should be doing that.
Yeah.
For sure. And actually, I'd love to ask off the back of that, because I think a lot of us follow a lot of kind of Instagram, TikTok, whatever it is, a lot of accounts that are perhaps triggering or unhelpful for us. And of course, like, there are some quick fixes like unfollow. But also we do live in the world. And do you think there's maybe like some kind of deeper work to do in terms of just allowing ourselves to be surrounded by people who might have more than us or are doing better than us or are further ahead than us, and just be okay with it?
Yeah, I really do. And I also think something that comes up a lot with my clients and the people that I mentor, or when I guest lecture at unis, that such a key theme that comes up is my competition. So, oh, it's so competitive. But actually, if you reframe competition and see it as a positive, it's a really beautiful thing. Like, competition allows us to identify gaps in the market. It should enhance what makes us individuals. So don't look at your competition and think they're doing this. Think, oh, well, I do it differently, and that's an amazing thing. And I think when you reframe that comparison culture and you think of it as a way of either seeing it as inspiration, so wow, that's amazing that they did that, what did they do in their career to get that TED talk or to land that brand deal or to get that investment, whatever it is, and actually use it more as a case study for inspo. And I think, like,
For sure, yeah.
we forget that our journeys are meant to be unique.
Yeah.
And that's the beautiful part of our stories, and that's what helps us bring our own brands and our own businesses to life. It's our unique journey, and it's not looking about what other people are doing. So
Sure.
it's so easily done though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But actually, I really relate to what you're saying, and I cannot remember who said it. I think it was a podcast I was listening to, but I found a really useful reframe, which was essentially, think of it as rivalry, not competition. Like, they're two very different things. Competition suggests that there's kind of one winner and one loser.
Yeah.
Whereas rivalry is more, you're spurring each other on. It's a much healthier, friendly thing to do, and it's just, like you say, a positive and pushing everyone forward. But one thing that I've been really interested to ask you about is something you talk a lot about, is connecting your aspirations as a business owner to something deeper than money. And I'd love to know, why do you think that's so important, and what is it for you that drives you beyond money?
I think money's great, like, don't get me wrong, and most people start businesses to make money, and we all need money to survive. So of course it's good to have financial ambitions, but after 5-10 years, that's not going to be the only thing that wakes you up in the morning. And also, just from like a consumer landscape point of view, people want to work with brands and individuals who have a deeper purpose now, because the people we buy from, the people we interact with, they become extensions of our own personal brand. And actually it's been really interesting to monitor the shift over the last few years. A lot of people now are embarrassed to buy from certain brands. Like, fast fashion has become uncool because it doesn't align with consumer values. So actually championing your values and being really clear on your values will help you magnetize a stronger audience and community as well. And that is, in my opinion, having that strong, sustainable community that buy into you and your values and understand why you do what you do is far more powerful than plugging a load of money into ad spend. It's about really creating a narrative and a story that people can buy into. And that's where brands that have longevity, I think that's why they're so successful, is because it's really clear what their mission is, and it's really easy for people to buy into them. And in terms of, you asked what my values are, I worked agency side, I worked with brands, and I worked with really big agencies. And I often found that I'd be in meetings and they bamboozle us with jargon and all these big words. And I'm the kind of person that will just say, can you explain what that means? Or can you elaborate? And a lot of times I was made to feel so stupid. And there were people in my team that also felt like they couldn't speak up. And I just thought, this isn't right. Like, there's so many amazing creatives and business owners out there who want to start marketing themselves and want to start putting their businesses out there, but don't quite know how. So my mission is to make URL feel as human as IRL. So I want people to enjoy social media interactions as much as they do real life ones like this. I want them to feel like they can take charge of it. And I know the word empowerment is so overused, but I want my clients and my community to be like, do you know what? This is actually fun and it's not that scary. And take what can feel like quite an overwhelming topic and subject, which ultimately, like, social media is not going anywhere. All business owners have to be on social media now. They don't have to be, but it's obviously, you kind of do in a way. So yeah, to be able to use the platforms and not feel completely overwhelmed and anxious about it, that's what I love. And when I speak to people and they say, oh, I feel really confident about it now, I'm like, okay, cool, that's why I do what I do.
Yeah.
That's so rewarding when people who come to me and they're like, oh my God, I'd rather eat my own hair than show up on Instagram. And then like, yeah, loving life. Because it's just nice to see that progression and nice to see people just being confident in their ideas and their businesses and not feeling ashamed or embarrassed about it.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And I think it's so true. And I mean, showing up online is one thing that is so difficult, I think, for so many of us as business owners. But another thing that is really difficult for a lot of business owners, especially starting out, is the conversation about money. And not only talking to clients about money, but talking to other business owners, people that are in the same industry about money. And I'd be interested to just know a bit about your experience with that, and when you started out, when you left the agency side life and you started up your own business. How did you start having those conversations, and who did you turn to talk about rates and what you should be charging?
So when I first started, I didn't have a clue what I was doing, to be honest.
No,
and I look back at what I was charging, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like massively was undercharging, which I think is a really common thread that we see with business owners in the initial stages. But I started off charging on an hourly rate, and actually I had a mentor, and they said charging for strategy versus other things, like they're completely different price points. They have such different value. And a really, I guess, a big turning point in my mindset around charging my worth was I was working with a mentor, and they kind of gave me this structure of what you're buying versus what you're getting. And what you're buying is the deliverables. So it's an hour workshop, one-to-one strategy session, content creation. That's the deliverable. And that's what I was charging for. But she said, actually, what they're getting is lifetime knowledge, confidence in their business, capacity to work on other projects, a deep understanding of the social media ecosystem. Like you're not just giving them these deliverables. And I think we have a tendency to just look at exactly what we're providing people with and charge them based on that. But actually, a lot of the time we're transforming people's businesses. And although it might not be a direct return there and then, over time, building a brand, building out a marketing strategy, the ROI on that is phenomenal. So we need to remember that it's not just what you're giving them there and then, it's the long-term benefits that we're providing people with. So that was really helpful for me. But I'll be really honest, I still find money chat really uncomfortable. I try and get it out the way as early on as I can with clients. And when I have those initial conversations, I bring it up in the initial and I give them a really transparent view of what they're getting. But in personal life, I think it's so taboo, and it's such a shame because especially for women, I think, you know, you hear so much about recruiters saying, women, up your rates. There are men charging 3 times what you are and they're far less qualified. And we see that pattern so much. But I have started over the years to talk to my friends about what they're charging. And it's been game changing because actually I'm like, oh my gosh, that's incredible that you're charging that much. I'm going to charge that much. And then brands don't bat an eyelid and you're like, oh my gosh, this whole time I've been worried about it. And also learning negotiation skills and learning how to sell yourself. And it is sticky, it is uncomfortable. And we do find it awkward, especially British people. I think like we're so polite. But the more open we can be, the better. And the more transparent we can be, the better, because by having those conversations, we ultimately help other people. But it's definitely a work in progress for me personally. I do still find it quite uncomfortable.
Sure, and I think you're right. I think it's so widespread, and I do think it's more common amongst women. And I think another thing that is also very common is just underselling ourselves in general in business, and underselling our value and what we're able to bring to the table. And I'd love to know whether you have any tips for how to, you know, avoid that kind of underselling that we often have a habit of doing. I think that might be a bit of a British thing as well.
Yeah.
We don't want to kind of toot our own horn. And also, how do we know when it's time to walk away or say no to an opportunity?
Yeah, I think the underselling thing, it is really difficult. And I still experience this now. Like I'm the first person to say, you know, get out there, put your stuff on social media, like share your magic with the world. But it can be really hard, especially when you're not feeling your best self.
Yeah.
So I think, again, really cliche, but taking care of yourself outside of your business is fundamental for your own confidence. Because when you don't feel good, you're naturally just going to recoil from talking about the things that you do in your amazing work, and it will be more difficult to do that when you're not in a great headspace. So I think having a baseline of self-care and just knowing what makes you feel good outside of your work as well. And then something that I've had to do myself recently, I'm working on something at the moment, and it's floored me. Like my imposter syndrome, I actually spoke to you earlier about this separately, but the imposter syndrome I've been feeling, I haven't felt this for years. I think it's the worst it's ever been since starting my business. And I completely
I can really relate. It's such a horrible
it's a hideous feeling, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I'd almost forgotten it, and it kept coming up. And I actually reached out to my Instagram community and just said, I'm feeling the worst imposter syndrome. How do you all overcome this? And I got so many amazing responses, but someone said, create a list of all your achievements, big and small, personal and professional. And I did it the same day that they said it. And I've got a note section in my phone now of everything I've ever done that I'm proud of. And when I am feeling this horrible feeling that, it comes up and it's normal, I just go back to that and I read it. And it is really helpful because it's kind of like, okay, I'm not a fraud. I have done these amazing things before. And in terms of the opportunities and knowing if it's the right thing, again, I feel like I'm being so cliche today, but your gut instinct never lies.
Yeah.
I've had so many times where I've got on calls and been like, this is a bit off key.
You're right, yeah.
And then you do it and you're like, oh, for God's sake, like I've completely betrayed myself there because I knew. But ask lots of questions, have a really clear vetting process about the projects, the people you're working with. Don't be afraid to interrogate, because if they can't give you answers and if they're cagey about their answers, that's usually an answer in itself. So I went through a stage of feeling really apologetic for having to really scope things out before I went with it. But now I'm just kind of like, my time is precious, my energy is precious as well. And if you work on things that are out of alignment, then you'll just end up resenting the work. And resentment, especially at work, is one of the worst feelings.
Yeah, I was just going to ask actually, have you experienced that where you have said yes to things and then later down the line you've realised that you absolutely should have listened to your gut? And if so, how did you kind of push through to get that done, and what lessons did you learn from it?
Yeah, loads of times, to be honest. Not so much now, because I think I know my personal telltale signs of when something's not right, and I can usually suss it out. But yeah, there's been times when I've taken on projects and they've either been completely out of alignment with my values, not realising once I'd started, and then it's kind of down the line I've begun to realise this is way off, like this is not for me at all. And then working with people that demand too much, but I haven't had the steps in place to stop that from happening. So I think having a contract in place with really clear deliverables. I now have service level agreements as well. So you will get a response within 24 hours. If it's urgent, let me know. But if not, you can't just have things there and then. I'm not going to be up till 11 o'clock at night. And something someone said to me, which has always stuck with me, is your urgency is not my emergency. And actually having your own business boundaries and your own confidence and ability to say, I can't do this. This is not how this works. And those difficult conversations are so tough. And I've had to call people and say, this just isn't working. And it is awkward.
Yeah.
And it is cringeworthy. And it is like, oh my gosh. But the more you do that, the easier it gets. And I think being upfront from the get-go, like I said, having your contracts in place, being super clear on what your deliverables are, have that vetting process. And it is awkward, I'm not going to lie, it is. But the more you get into it and the more that becomes part of your process, it just becomes a natural part of your workflow and a natural part of your onboarding. But yeah, don't be afraid to go deep into the detail and really interrogate people before you work with them, for sure.
Yeah, I relate to so much of what you're saying there. And I think, what you're describing is what anyone who's really started a business, the challenges that we've come up against. And you mentioned before having a mentor, and I just wondered, how did you find a mentor, and is it something you recommend to anybody either starting or in the earlier stages or even later stages of business?
Yeah, absolutely. I've had mentors since, not since day one, actually. It was probably about a year and a half after starting Selfhood. And I looked at the companies that I really admired and wanted to be like, and went and found the people in those companies whose job role I resonated with, or looked at their career journey, and just a few times they were too busy, and that's fine. That's part of the process.
Totally.
Like, the people you're reaching out to will be busy. But incidentally, I got one lady on a call who I really respect in my industry. We had a chat. We had a virtual coffee date. I had an hour of her time, which was so incredibly valuable. But she just said, look, I've just had a baby. I don't actually have time to do this all the time. But here's someone I think you should talk to based on what you've told me. And she went on to mentor me for 6 months and really helped me shape Selfhood when I was kind of in my growth stage. But yeah, absolutely. There's no shame in asking for help. And I think sometimes we feel like we have to do it all by ourselves, or that we're inexperienced. Everyone's inexperienced.
Yeah.
Everybody, even the people at the top. Like, everybody says everyone's winging it. You just get better at masking it.
I just find that so interesting, because I think there's a bit of I certainly feel it, and I'm sure others would. I just feel it's a bit of a big ask to ask somebody, to just give me their time and expertise. But actually, it sounds like you've had a really different response, and that people have been willing to just kind of help you out and encourage what you're doing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, I mean, I've paid some mentors and they've gone on to be more coaches, but I have had lots of like off the record chats with people, and even an hour of their time, I've learned so much. But you can always go to them and say, I'm happy to give you X in exchange. If you can't financially support it, but happy to give you some kind of skill swap or value exchange as well. So don't if you haven't got the money to pay for a coach, don't let that stop you. And what I would say is there's a lot of people out there who are just really happy to help. And I think I used to, and still do, you look at these really successful people and think they're far too busy to talk to little old me. Like, they're not going to give me their time. People are generally just really nice people. And I've sent really gushy fangirl messages to people like, please let me speak to you. And they don't reply. But that's okay. Like, they're just busy, and it's never, it's really easy to take stuff like that personally, but they are just really busy people. And it's highly unlikely that they've read that message and thought, oh my gosh, what a geek, I'm not replying to that. They are just busy with their own lives.
Yeah. And I think there's something as well that is actually quite flattering, I think, for a lot of people to get those messages. It's like, as much as we all like to pretend we don't, we all do love a bit of an ego boost.
Yeah.
And someone dropping into your inbox being like, oh, actually, like, you're like amazing.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, yeah, that's a great feeling to feel.
It is. Yeah, of course it is. And I think especially in business, because a lot of the time, especially senior people or business owners or freelancers, they're working independently, so you don't get a lot of praise, and you're relying on yourself to give yourself the pat on the back. So when you get nice messages like that, it's a massive ego boost. So again, if you think about it that way, you're not just pestering someone, you're also super flattering for them. I think as well, if you are going to do that, just a tip on that is to be specific about why you're reaching out to that specific person, so that they know that you're not just copying and pasting a message to any old someone. Just say, I watched your career journey, I've seen the campaigns you've worked on, I do X, Y, Z, I'm in awe of the work that you did for blah, blah, blah. So they know that it's a genuine, it's a genuine request. But I think go for it, definitely.
I think also, as a sort of side benefit, like, you're massively increasing your network whilst you're doing that as well.
Yeah.
And networking is such a huge part of business. But I know you've been quite open about the fact that you have suffered with kind of social anxiety. How did you kind of navigate that as an early business owner? And do you think that's something you've been able to overcome, or is it a constant kind of work in progress?
Yeah, it was really bad when I first started the Selfhood. I'd always worked in-house with teams and always had managers and bosses, and I guess in a way like people you can not fall back on, but if anything goes wrong, they're there to confide in.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I was doing everything by myself, and everyone makes mistakes in the beginning.
Absolutely. And not in the beginning.
All the
And
time.
afterwards, yeah, 100%, like every week.
Yeah.
But you just get better at managing it, because it's, when it first happens, it's like the end of the world.
Yes.
Your entire
Yes.
earth is shattered.
Absolutely.
So in the beginning, like, little things kept happening, which at the time felt obviously astronomical, but now I'm like, they're actually quite funny. But yeah, I think that also played a massive part in it, because not only was I feeling insecure and quite socially anxious, I didn't really know what I was doing. And I think a lot of the advice out there, especially in business, is just go in the deep end, do the thing that scares you, just go for it. Like, what's the phrase? Like, fuck the fear and do it anyway. And that's fine.
Yeah.
And that works for loads of people, but that doesn't work for me.
Sure.
And I went to a few networking events, and I went on my own, and I hated the whole thing. I felt really insecure. I was in rooms full of people who had these amazing job titles, amazing businesses. And when it would come to introducing myself, I would just go completely inward. I'd go bright red. I used to hate public speaking. So being in those spaces was enough to feel quite triggering for me. So I then started setting myself really what seem, I guess when I say them out loud, they might sound big to some people, but at the time for me, they were measurable goals and easy for me to implement to grow my confidence, not just at work, but in my personal life. So a story I always tell is the first step for me, which sounds to so many people like nothing, but it was a big deal, was to go into coffee shops, and instead of saying, oh, hiya, can I have an oat milk latte? I'd actually chat to them and say, how's your day been? What time did you finish? And that got me into the groove of talking to strangers. And I always say, like, I live in East, and a lot of the time people would think I was either trying to chat them up or like that I was drunk.
Oh, very true.
And it was awkward and it was weird at first. And then once I got really comfortable with that, I was like, okay, I'm going to pitch myself to speak on podcasts at home. So I was able to sit remotely at home, work on talking about my business with people. Then I hosted my own virtual event when I was comfortable with that. Then last year I did my first ever in-person event on my own that I ran by myself. And I just really built up little steps to grow my confidence. And that's what I recommend to everyone, because it's really interesting actually. Whenever I talk about my fear of public speaking, I get so many messages from people saying, oh my gosh, I feel exactly the same. I find it terrifying. And I think a lot of people feel that way. And a lot of the advice that I've seen is to just like go for it, do the thing. And actually it is really scary when you're scared of talking in front of other people. And even like in meetings and stuff, I used to really struggle with that. So for me, it was about like taking the little steps and it being more of a journey. But it still happens. I still get invited to do things that feel way out of my comfort zone, and I still do purposely put myself out of my comfort zone, because that was part of the challenge for me when I got comfortable with the coffee shop. And then when I got comfortable with the podcast, it was like, okay, what's the next thing? And keep building on it. So I think it's about identifying some things that you can do for yourself as an individual and just keep monitoring it. Am I comfortable and confident with this? If so, what's the next step? And then when I get comfortable with that, what's the next step? But yeah, it's been a journey. It's still a journey. I still find public speaking terrifying every time I walk on a stage or sit on a panel. I still get really scared, but then after you do it, it's like, oh, that was actually really good and that went really well. And your confidence just keeps growing and growing. So I think, yeah, for anyone that struggles with the idea of just doing it, just set yourself some really realistic tasks, and they can be really small that you build up over time.
Yeah, I mean, that makes total sense, because I think sometimes as well, if you rush and push yourself too quickly, it doesn't go to plan and then it can set you back 10 steps anyway. So it makes so much sense just to actually go at your own pace. And I guess it might mean sometimes saying no to opportunities.
Yeah.
But actually, like you say, it's about looking after you, not just doing the best thing for the business.
Yeah, totally. And also, just to plug as well, my friend Steph has a platform called Fuck Being Humble, and she talks a lot about growing your confidence. She's a professional public speaker, and she's got some amazing resources on public speaking as well. So, yeah, she's a great resource to go and check out. But you're so right. Sometimes it might be too soon, and it might not be the right opportunity for you, in which case, you know, it's okay to say no and build your confidence and come back to it. That's not an issue.
Well, we are big fangirls of Steph. She was on our first episode of this series.
Oh, she's amazing, isn't she?
She is absolutely brilliant, and absolutely agree, for anyone who's struggling with their confidence and just kind of banging their own drum, should really be going and following
great.
Steph for sure. But I'd love to know, I mean, honestly, we could speak to you for ages, but before we let you go, I'd love to know, what are the big things you're working on now, and what's your kind of, what are your major goals and aspirations that you're working towards at the moment?
Honestly, I don't know. And I get asked this question a lot. What's next for Selfhood? What are your growth plans? And I am just going day by day at the minute. I honestly don't know what the future holds. What I would love next year is to have 50% on client work, 50% on Selfhood. I'd like to do more events. I'd like to do more talks. I'd like to grow the Selfhood as a brand a bit more and look at that side of things. But it's so hard to plan in my industry because it changes all of the time. What I don't want is to grow into a big agency, and lots of people say, oh, you know, are you hiring? I don't want that.
No.
I like my independence, and I have some freelancers that work with Selfhood really closely and collaboratively, and it's amazing. It works really well. But I'm quite happy with where I'm at right now, and I don't want to rush it. I've got a secret project on that I can't talk about. That's coming out next year. That's got a lot of my focus. So I'm just plugging time into that, working with clients who are amazing. I love my clients. And then I'm just going to see how it goes. I don't have the big 5-year plan, and sometimes that makes me feel and sound like an amateur, but I'm actually really cool with that.
No, I don't have one either, and I find it so refreshing. I'm hearing it more and more from people, and a few of our guests have said the same, and I'm like, oh, great, it's not just me. And I think probably because we have been so sold this, you must have a 5-year plan and a 10-year plan and a 20-year plan. I think it's just refreshing to say, actually, I'm just seeing where it goes.
Just chilling.
And seeing what opportunities come up, because that's the thing as well. I think there's some real benefits to being so rigidly set on a plan, and that's amazing. But you also then close yourself off to that flexibility and opportunities and stuff like that.
Totally. Yeah.
But thank you so much
Thank you.
for coming to chat. It has been so great to hear about your story and your journey. And we're very excited to find out more about Secret Project next year. But for anybody that is interested in finding out more about the Selfhood and following your journey, where can we find you?
You can find me on Instagram. I'm at _self_hood. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm Daisy Morris. I love LinkedIn, by the way.
Do you?
I love it so much, yeah. I'm actually more active on LinkedIn than I am Instagram. And you can sign up to my newsletter as well via the website, www.theselfhood.com.
Amazing. Well, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. It's been fabulous to talk to you.
Oh, LinkedIn is a whole world, isn't it?